Project, I kind of just go with whatever is working. So when I started this flower, I thought I was going to be doing a short and long stitch, but I ended up actually doing a fishbone stitch. I do my fishbone a little bit different than everyone. I also do most of my embroidery a little bit different than everyone else. So in this case, I just kind of do a stitch about halfway to 3/4 of the way down, and then I start alternating back and forth which side my stitch will come from, and then going just in front of the stitch before or just on the other side, so kind of into almost like the same hole, and I kind of cross over. Sometimes I just let them sit right at each other. I mean, I'm not giving the best tutorial, but I didn't also do the very best job on this stitch. I kind of just went with what was working. I tucked some of them behind because it was getting too thick at the bottom, and I crossed over some of them. So I would go with a fishbone stitch for this one. This is the joy of a follow along, is I am sort of figuring it out as I go too. Normally when I make a pattern, I stitch it myself first and then I share it with you. So I've worked out all the kinks. For this one, you can see I did much more of a fishbone style. Color. I did all of the petals that kind of looked like they were at the forefront, so I went around and I pulled all the ones that were, the front ones, and then I used an alternating color and I went back and I did kind of those stitches that were those petals that are stuck behind the little ones that, where the shape is, and then I went back in with just 2 strands of an even darker color, and I added some little stitches, all different varying lengths. I just add as many as I think it needs to give the right amount. Okay, I'm trying to stitch and you're right up my butt. It's not going to be... Strands of floss, so just pop that on your needle, and you're going to start on one side of the petal edge, and you're literally just making a loop that kind of traces the petal, and you're going to tack the first one down on one side, and then on the other side you're going to start a new loop. You're going to loop it up and go around there, and sometimes what'll happen is your thread will get twisted like this, and the best thing to do is try to untwist it, and if you can't, I pull it flat and then I kind of wiggle it back out, and a lot of the time that'll straighten it out. And then you tack those 2 on the next side together down. And as you can see, as I'm making the loops, I'm holding the other ones down, and then I am using my finger as a guide to not pull it too tight, but also give it the right shape and in the right position. So the hardest part about this part of the process is actually just the patience and the time. I think these loops, this section took me 10 minutes just to do the loops and just to make sure that they were all flat and all in the right size and tacked down properly. And then this second part, you're going to also use 12 strands, and you're just going to fill it in. So it's just a straight stitch with your floss from bottom to top. And pretty much after every stitch, I do a little fluff. So I'll kind of go back and forth with my needle. I will often stick the needle underneath the loops or the stitches, hold it up, and then pull. And when I pull, it creates a cohesive look, and it often will make them all sort of the same depth. So some aren't sticking out further than others, and some aren't tighter than others. And I kind of rub my needle underneath and pull and tighten, and it's just sort of a bit of a finicky game, but I stitch all through there, and then I try to cover that tack. So if you can see, I went right in front of the tack, and then I pull back in to the side, and what that does is it kind of creates that texture, and it also covers where those sides are tacked down. The thing I find about that is that it comes up a little loose. It doesn't have as secure of a holding. So this is how I do a fake stem stitch, and I love this stitch, and this is how I always do my stems. So you're going to create one straight stitch. You're going to come back up a stitch length away, and then you're going to pull back, and you're just going to tuck it underneath that original stitch. It's nice and secure, but it tucks underneath. And you want to keep going the same way. So you're going to come up a stitch length away from your last hole that you can see from the top, and then tuck it beneath your last stitch. And that creates a way more tight, seamless stem stitch look without it being loose and not quite as secure. It's actually just a mix between a stem stitch and a whipped back stitch. It's kind of like a fake whipped back. This is a super quick leaf stitch tutorial. So you're going to do one stitch in the middle from the tip to about halfway down, and then you're going to alternate sides, meeting just a little bit below the last stitch and using the same hole for both sides so that it's very symmetrical and even on each side. It's very similar to a leaf bone stitch. Actually, for a very long time, I was calling them the same thing. But with this one, you're meeting right below that first stitch, and then so on and so forth. Whereas a fishbone, you're crossing over. So at the end, you can see I just kind of make little stitches side by side to fill in if they're not even.